Welcome to Your Gal Friday, a podcast about female leaders, innovators, and rule breakers. Each week, your hosts, Kate and Phoebe, will shine a spotlight on an amazing gal and talk about what we can all learn from her. Brought to you by Gal's Guide to the Galaxy. Welcome to Your Gal Friday. I'm Kate Chaplin.
And I'm Phoebe Freer.
Whether this is your first episode that you're checking out or your 20th, my goodness, do we have a treat for you. We are going to be recapping the 19 gals that we have covered on the show. We're going to provide more insights about what we've learned after the show released. Behind the scenes, our favorite bits, listener feedback, and plans for the future. So how did we get all of this started? Well, in May of 2017, Gal's Guide to the Galaxy was created as a 501c3 with a focus on women's history in efforts to provide role models, inspiration, and wisdom for today, tomorrow, and the future. Gal's Guide's goal was to be a multimedia company, and one of those medias was podcasting. Now, I had been doing podcasting for a few years, and I absolutely love the medium. I also knew that a show like this needed two hosts and that it would be a lot of work, but also a wonderful education. So I wanted to bring in somebody younger for a co-host. I wanted to bridge that kind of age gap. And when Phoebe serendipitously came to visit me and said she really wanted to help out Gal's Guide, we talked more about the idea of a show to shine a spotlight on women of history. So Phoebe, do you remember your first thoughts on the idea?
I do. At first, I was actually very overwhelmed. I was like, "Oh wow, that's a very ambitious idea. I really like it, but how would we? What?" Like, I was very overwhelmed. I was like, "How would I even begin?" And then I was overwhelmed that you would, think of me.
Of course.
Because I was like, well, I don't know enough about these gals. Like, you tell me these names, and I'm one of those people that doesn't know any of them. So I'm like, I was also very honored that you thought of me. So I thought it was really cool. Yeah, totally.
So how has your foray into podcasting been for you?
It's been pretty cool. As a filmmaker, I have all this equipment, but I'm like, I definitely don't have the podcasting equipment I want to have. So I definitely am going to be looking into that during our break. But I'm like, all right, this is cool. I like being able to do some research and just talk with you and talk about our thoughts and everything. It's just been really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been spending so much more time together than we ever did.
Yeah, totally. We talk to each other every day, and it's really great.
I know,
even when it's not about podcast stuff, we're like, oh, did you see this today? Did you see that? You know? Did you see that Google Doodle today? Have you heard of this lady?
So Phoebe and I, we started with a list of gals. I think at the time when we started, it was 50 or 60. I can't remember. It was right around there.
Yeah.
It is now past 120.
Yeah.
We're at 122 now.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So what we do is we look at each month, we find what we call our Fab Four, and then we start researching. Right. Now, some of the gals that we cover, our listeners might have heard maybe a sentence about. Others probably have never heard of them whatsoever.
Right. Like me.
Right, exactly. Yes. And it's like, what did they do again? Ooh, now that sounds interesting. So
right, exactly.
Either way, it's kind of an in point sort of thing to kind of learn. So,
right.
But there's this really deep well of wisdom that we can learn from these gals. And that's why in every episode, we start with what Phoebe and I already knew about the gals. That way, you know, as listeners, what our baseline basically was.
Totally.
That way, if you had never heard of them, you don't feel alone if neither one of us have either.
Right, exactly.
And then we end the show with what legacy do we feel like they wanted to leave behind, and what did we learn from them? We always kind of end it that way, which I love.
I do too.
Yeah, it's a nice kind of through line between all the shows.
Totally.
Although, as I looked back, we actually didn't do what did we learn on Alice, our first episode.
What?
We didn't do that one. Yeah, we talked about her legacy, but
I know. Oh my goodness.
It must be something we thought of for,
After
episode
Alice.
2 and then going on. Yeah, that's the
Wow.
evolution.
I didn't even notice.
I didn't notice till I looked back at it.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So each month we mix it up. We try not to have too many duplicate subject matters. So we mix it up between art and science, history and culture. Those are our 4 for our Fab 4. Right. Sometimes it works out well. Sometimes we really want to cover this one.
typically we balance it out pretty well. And then sometimes with our special episodes, I think we kind of got a little off, but at the same time, I think it worked itself out. So.
It did. Yeah, exactly. Yep. But the special episodes were just really special. So we jumped on it.
Right. When we pick our 4 gals that we cover, we do try to go with gals that are diverse and like ones that we haven't covered before. But we also try to go cover ones that we feel passionately about at the time, so that we're not just like blindly going through and not caring about who we're talking about. We try to pick those and like save the gals for those moments when we're like, okay, I'm really excited about Hedy Lamarr today. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like who's kind of talking at you. Totally. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's jumping out at you. Yeah.
This gal's story wants to be told, it feels like, and it goes on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So the show has educators and students in mind. Right. So we make every attempt to try to keep the show PG.
Yes.
Now, that does sometimes limit us, but we have many gals to talk about. So luckily it hasn't become a problem. Right. If it does become a problem and there's a gal we really want to talk about, but she's not necessarily PG, we did even bounce around the idea of doing a special Patreon only show called Saucy Gals.
Totally. Which would be super fun because it just would.
Exactly. Yes. So if it comes to that, that's what our plans are.
Right.
So Phoebe and I also, for every show, we split up the research. Right. We start with a list of questions that we kind of want to know about the gal, and then we divide and conquer. So, and I have the best co-host, ladies and gentlemen. Phoebe is absolutely amazing. She works really hard, and I just absolutely love her spirit. When she finds something in research and she's totally geeking out about it, I just love it when she shares it with me. I know this show is a lot of work. It really is like a thesis paper. Really every week.
Oh my gosh,
yeah. But I wouldn't want to be traveling. I wouldn't want to be time traveling with anybody else. So I do love my Phoebes.
I love you too, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Well, okay, so let's get into looking back at these episodes, shall we? All right. Now, some of them seem like forever ago, and some of them seem like yesterday.
Yeah, and it's weird because like Alice feels like forever ago, but yesterday at the same time. And Hedy feels like forever ago, at least for me, but like Harriet Tubman seems like yesterday. But it's just so weird.
Right. It is very weird. Yeah. And I think I do wonder if part of it is because they keep coming up in our lives. You know what I mean? Like they're either in other episodes or in other things that we're seeing or something like that.
Totally.
So it kind of brings back all that research and work and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so Alice Guy Blanchet, I'm so glad that I say it right now instead of Alice Guy Blanche that I used to say for decades. She was our very first episode. So as a quick refresher, she is a gal who created the framework that would make movies last over 100 years. Her innovations included the first to tell a story on film, first to use sound, first to feature interracial casts. She created the music video, and she was the first female to own a movie studio, which was also the largest in pre-Hollywood studio America. She was the world's first female filmmaker, and she was our first episode.
She was. It was the perfect first episode because it was something that we're both filmmakers, you know, so we had a lot in common with Alice for both of us.
Yep. So we understood where she was coming from completely.
Did. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was very easy for us to just dive right in and discover podcasting through Alice. Like that was that was a real gift, really, to be able to have Alice as our first one.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. She is actually our second most downloaded episode.
Yay!
Which is awesome. Yeah. And then after the episode, I did go to where Solak Studios was.
Right.
There is a sign.
Yeah, there's a sign in a grocery store, right?
Yeah. It's an Acme grocery store. You can't make this up.
No. Sad face.
Yep, I know. I also tried to go visit her gravesite
Right.
in New Jersey, but the cemetery actually had very strict hours and we were stuck in traffic and we're late. So
Oh, shoot.
that is still a trip that I need to take.
That's right.
Yeah, I wanted to make it. I was trying to. We were doing a whirlwind tour.
Right.
Absolutely. What did you love learning about Alice or researching about Alice? What was it about the Alice episode that you loved?
Well, the most obvious part that I loved is the fact that she's a filmmaker, of course.
Yeah.
It's very easy right now to feel alone because, like, being a female filmmaker and being an independent and, you know, not really being in the middle of Hollywood and having people to talk to, it's kind of easy to feel alone. But at the same time, like, I get to talk to you, Kate, and then we researched Alice together, and it's like, okay, that's really cool. But I think the coolest thing for me was just learning what she did and how she moved forward. She was always discovering new things despite limitations. Like, she worked in film, you know, like film. And we have digital. We have so many more options. And we can be even more creative now, you know, but she used her resources very effectively.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And created new opportunities
too. Yeah. Exactly.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
I adore Alice, and they are still working on the documentary that we mentioned called Be Natural.
Yeah.
So they're getting very close to finishing it. Yay. So I'm super excited to see that as well.
Me too.
So then what was episode number 2 for us?
So episode number 2 was about Hedy Lamarr, and she was our first scientist.
Yes.
Even though she was also an actress, Hedy Lamarr was a gal who was promoted by Louis B. Mayer as the world's most beautiful woman, and she acted in a little over 30 films and had her fair share of scandal in the press. Off-screen, though, she was a complex woman who fled her home country, married half a dozen times, and spent her free time just inventing things. Her patent with George Anthill and her blueprint for technology that we all use today, in fact, some of you might be using this technology to listen to this show, is called frequency hopping, and it's used in cell phones, Bluetooth, and in Wi-Fi.
Yes.
So Hedy Lamarr was our first scientist, and it was very interesting because I'm not a scientist. Science was not my strong suit in school, we'll say.
Gotcha.
So, like, I was a little nervous. I would say science was my most scared topic to go.
Intimidated kind of by it? Yeah, I'm with you.
So I was kind of timid about it, but, like, Hedy Lamarr, her science was all about, like, mechanical stuff. And at the time, I could go to my grandfather, who was all about mechanical. Like, that's all he loves, mechanics, you know?
Yeah.
So it took a long time. Like, it took us, like, 2 weeks to figure out the science behind this. But I got to actually sit and talk with my grandfather and compare notes and actually sit and understand to the best that I could exactly what we were talking about, which was really cool to discover that we could learn this stuff and actually be able to talk about it.
A bonding experience also, too.
Totally. Exactly.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved that part of it.
Right.
That you got that connection. I fell in love with looking at patents because her patent was gorgeous. It was a line art drawing, but there was just something so beautiful about this patent.
I agree, yeah.
My dad has patents. We've talked about that a couple of times on the show. But I haven't seen any drawings from them. And digitally, they're words on a patent page. But this was different. This really kind of, felt tactile and awesome. And so, yeah, starting there, I'm like, who else has a patent? Because I just want to read it and look at it and, and share the photos with it. It's just beautiful.
Totally.
The other thing that I loved about the Hedy episode is looking at the construct of brains versus beauty.
Totally.
Because we kept finding that she was so judged for her beauty and for, being, gorgeous and, that she can't possibly be smart was kind of like what we kept finding. And I'm like,
we did.
Why does it have to be mutually exclusive? It's not one or the other.
Right.
It's really just not fair.
It's not.
So it really made me feel for her. And it also made me see people differently as well, too, where it's like, you know what? Nobody's just a pretty face, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, don't judge a book by its cover. It was, of course, what I was kind of relearning in the Hedy Lamarr episode.
Totally. So what was number 3?
Number 3 was Coco Chanel. Wow, was this one a doozy?
Oh, yeah.
So the kind of recap of Coco, her name has graced perfume and clothing and handbags since the 1920s. She freed women from the constraints of the corset and popularized the sporty and casual elegance. Now, because of Coco, most women have in their closet a little black dress. She's the only fashion designer listed on Time magazine's list of 100 most influential people of the 20th century. This feisty gal created an empire and a brand that still exists today. You may know the brand, but do you know Coco Chanel? And goodness, did we learn about Coco Chanel?
Yeah, I did not know anything about Coco Chanel. Did you?
I thought I did, and I did not.
I thought I did. I thought I had her pegged even, and that was really arrogant of me to think of, because I did not have her pegged at all. I had no clue what we were going to run into. That was crazy. I remember, Kate, when we first discovered, I read something, I was reading, Wikipedia, and sometimes Wikipedia is known for, not checking your sources, right? And
exactly.
I'm reading this Wikipedia article, I'm like, potentially it worked with the Nazis? What?
I know, right? What is this?
Did you hear about? Did you even? What? Did you know about this? And then I remembered your reaction. I was like, "Oh man!" We spent the next hour going back and forth, "Oh my gosh, is this real?"
Trying to figure it out. Right? Exactly.
Back checking, trying to find different resources on it. We're like, "Nope." There's 3 sources that say this could be a thing. We're like, whoa.
Right.
Whoa.
And then we kind of had to put together the pieces of all the other research, with that really question mark hole, because there was evidence on both sides. So it's like, dude, we got to present both sides.
Right.
And, we'll do our best at drawing a conclusion, but also admitting we don't know.
We don't have a clue.
People have spent decades researching Coco and couldn't come up with something.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that was really challenging, but it is our most downloaded episode.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable. And it's one of those things where when we were doing the show and we were so worried, about presenting it, accurately, or at the very least, honestly, I kind of felt like people were going to love it or hate it. And it was probably going to be our most favorite, or not our most favorite episode, probably our most popular episode, because it was difficult, that people would be like, yeah, that's the difficult one. You should listen to this one.
Yeah. This is a surprising one. And then everybody knows the name Coco Chanel. But,
exactly.
But do we all know who she is? Nope, I totally didn't.
Exactly. The person behind the brand is totally a different thing. Yeah. And one of the reasons why it is one of our most popular episodes right now is because there's a new set of Chanel commercials. There's a new perfume, Gabrielle, where they talk about a little bit, a very interesting history of Coco. And they paint the picture, which is the one we thought we knew.
Right.
And then we look at her and like, oh, yeah, there's a little more. She's a complex woman.
She is.
Really complex.
Very complex.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that the new branding of commercials is the woman behind the brand. It's like, whoa, how much are you willing to tell us about here?
Right.
Do you really want to open this can of worms right now?
Yeah.
But it's really cool.
And I'm glad that people are opening that can of worms and finding out more about Coco.
Totally.
Yes. Oh, I love it. So then our next episode was
Bessie Coleman. Give you a little recap about Bessie Coleman. She was a gal who was so fearless that in a time when women, African Americans, and Native Americans were banned from learning how to fly, Bessie Coleman did learn. And in her own words, she refused to accept no for an answer. With nail-biting brainstorming. Oh, man.
we did that in the original one.
Did.
I
Oh,
did
man.
too. I think I said brainstorming.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, we should almost keep that.
I know.
That's hilarious. All right.
Barnstorming is not a normal word to us every
It's
now and
not.
again. It's brainstorming is what we're used to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I'm gonna try that one again. With nail-biting barnstorming, aerial stunt performances, this gal kept you on the edge of your seat. An inspiration to many, including astronauts, this gal used the airplane to promote equal rights and civil rights. Bessie Coleman is awesome.
Yeah, she
I
is.
had no idea how fascinating she would be. For some reason, I was just like, oh, she flew, cool. Like, no, she flew when she wasn't allowed to. Like, she
Right.
was literally not allowed to and had to go to a different country to learn how to, and then came back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And my biggest takeaway from Bessie was, like, I just want to talk about her more. I love her
I know,
story.
right?
And she wanted to make
Yeah.
a movie, and I'm like, well, maybe.
I know how to do
Yeah,
that.
I know how to make a movie. Like, yeah.
I loved Bessie. I loved everything about her. It's kind of, when we're in research mode, it's kind of like we're living with the gal for a little bit.
Very much
However
so.
long that is.
Yeah.
And I love the time living with Bessie,
Yeah,
basically.
me too.
I
Yeah.
really did.
Yeah.
It felt uplifting and yet a hard struggle, but an always moving forward struggle.
Totally. Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, cut short. What else she could have done?
Yeah.
How many more mountains she could have moved. I mean, she was in such a wonderful spot in her life, and she just kept achieving and motivating and inspiring people. It's like, oh man, if she could have got more time on this earth, it would have been a better place. I really think. I do want to visit her grave, hopefully soon. Her grave is near Chicago. I found out that apparently my great-great-grandfather is buried across the street from her.
What? That's crazy.
Because when I was telling my husband about, let's go up and see Bessie, this is where, her gravesite is. He's like, I've been to that area, because he went, and there was no photo of the tombstone of my great-great-grandfather. So he went up there while he was on a business trip just to take a photo. So he knew the area. And he's like, yeah, Bessie's at the other cemetery.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to go. I want to go one of these days.
Totally. So who was after Bessie?
Bessie. Then it was Ella Fitzgerald.
Yay.
Oh,
She was so much fun.
she really was. She was musical.
Yeah, literally.
Yes. So one of the top jazz singers in history is Ella Fitzgerald. She was named the First Lady of Song. She won 13 Grammys and sold more than 40 million albums. Now, she sang songs from the Great American Songbook, and she made them her own. Ira Gershwin actually once said about her, I never knew how good our songs were until I heard Ella Fitzgerald sing them. And that's kind of the truth.
So true.
Yeah. So I kind of brought in Ella Fitzgerald because I listened to a lot of Ella Fitzgerald.
Makes sense.
And I knew she just had a really cool story. So I was just like, no, I think you'll really like her.
Yeah, I totally did. And turns out my boyfriend's grandmother sang jazz in the 1940s. So it's possible that they crossed paths. Yeah.
Or knew of each other, or sang at the same clubs, or met. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. Ooh, that's very cool. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm looking forward to talking about more musicians, because just having that musical element, it feels like there's another layer of a way to get to know a gal, because you can, read about their story, and, see them in interviews, but you can also listen to their music.
Right.
And especially if they write their own music, Or even if they don't, like Ella didn't necessarily write her own music, not all of it because she sang from the Great American Songbook, but you could hear it in her voice.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
You could tell that emotion that she puts into things and see her performance of how she interacts with people. And it's like, it was just another kind of way to get to know her. So,
actually, my favorite documentaries of all time to watch are about musicians. So,
nice.
Yeah. So, like, I love learning about musicians and hearing their songs. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. So if during break you find if you find a documentary on a musician and want to cover, bam.
There's
put it on the list.
Okay, well, Lady Gaga I didn't watch it yet.
I still want to watch. I haven't watched it yet either. That's in my queue now.
But like Lady Gaga just made a documentary, so I gotta go watch that soon.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. That's a good one. Another musician that I did add to the list actually this week is Joan Jett. Doesn't have a documentary about her, but I've always wanted to know more about Joan Jett.
Too.
I mean, I Love Rock and Roll is such a that's an awesome song.
Right.
And many other songs, but I mean, that's the one that everybody knows. Oh, well, that's Joan Jett.
Right.
But yeah, and I'd like to mix it up. I mean, we did jazz. I would love to do country, opera, rock and roll, punk rock. If I'm missing a type of music, I'm sure I'm missing many of them. But it would be really fun to have the musicians from different genres of music. Yeah. Okay, so in between our kind of like a recappiness sort of thing, I wanted to throw in here, we also, along with the podcast, we do a quick video. We do a quick video and we do an article that kind of ties in with all of them. Right. Now, Phoebe is the one that makes our quick video. So shout out to Phoebe for making all of our videos. She takes the dot points from the episode and she makes a 2 to 4 minute video that we share on social media for the new episode on launch day.
Totally.
So then the question becomes, do you have a favorite one that you have done?
Well, I really liked doing Alice's video because
it was a good one.
It was really fun, but it was also the longest one to make because it was our second one after the
the promo video of here's what we're gonna do, video. Right?
Yeah. So it took some time to figure out a rhythm with it.
Yep. I really liked my two favorites because I was really debating on which favorites. I really liked the Ella Fitzgerald one because we could incorporate her music into it.
Yeah, that was fun.
Really liked how you balanced out, our music, which happened to be jazz.
Right.
And then also her scatting to give an idea and be able to show what that was.
Totally.
So I really like how you played in with the music for Ella. Yeah. I also thought Jane Addams was fantastic. And I know it's definitely because you had more to work with. We found her childhood photos.
We did. We really did.
And you utilized those very well in showing the photo at the time you were talking about with the dot points.
Oh, thank you.
So I thought the Jane one was definitely, if not tied with Ella, for my favorite quick video.
Yay! Nice. Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and it's interesting to go through and try to find photos for each gal because some of them are like in an old enough time period where it's hard to find photos, and then some of them have so many, and then you can't do like ones that are like watermarked or copyrighted, so it's very interesting trying to find content for them, but also not getting like lost in the sea of content.
Right,
so
exactly.
That's interesting. After I got the rhythm of it, the minimum amount of time it takes me to make them is 3 hours. And then
gotcha,
and then if it's more complicated, like, for example, Julia Childs was very long, and she had a lot of photos, and after that, I was, like, very overwhelmed because it was like, okay, this is a lot of information. So after that, I was like, all right, I'm gonna like make sure the content is roughly the same each week, or at least the same amount roughly. But yeah, and
exactly.
It's funny because in the middle of editing, I get to the point where the very last thing I do is animate the photos, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready, set, go, and I time myself, and it takes me 20 minutes every time to animate all the photos. I'm like, all right, 20 minutes remaining, ready, set, go.
Nice. It's like a countdown to it.
Totally.
Oh, I love that. Well, I did a quick countdown of adding together, because our Facebook views, of course, are, on one thing, and our YouTube views for the quick videos are on another.
Right.
So adding them together, our top 5, are you ready for our top 5 of the quick videos?
Yeah.
So the number 5 is Hedy Lamarr.
Yay.
Number 4 is Jane Addams. So one of my 2 favorites. Number 3 is J.K. Rowling.
Of course.
Number 2 is Beth Freer, your mom. You put all those beautiful family photos in there. I'm sure that really helped. And then number 1 is Alice, your favorite. Alice Guy Blanchet is the number 1 quick video watched. Yeah.
That's great.
I absolutely love it. Well, okay, so going back to our countdown, our number 6 episode was
Harriet Tubman.
I will let you geek out about her, because that's what we did the whole episode.
Oh my gosh, I love Harriet Tubman so much.
Tell the people again what she did.
Yeah. So Harriet Tubman was a remarkable rebel. She was born into slavery, and she not only escaped, but she made 13 rescue missions to save her family and friends. In the Civil War, she was a nurse, an armed scout, and a spy. She was the first woman to lead a wartime troops. And in 1865, it took 3 men to physically throw her into another train car after she insisted she had a right to sit wherever she wanted. She was a speaker for abolition, women's rights, temperance, and civil rights. In short, Harriet Tubman's like only one of my favorite people, probably in the whole universe.
She's very cool. And we had so much fun during that episode.
Totally.
It felt like time flew. It felt like we were not only getting through it, but we were into it, you know?
Yeah.
I really loved it. I didn't really know the woman behind the icon, you know what I mean? Until I saw a Drunk History special that covered how she led wartime troops and was a scout and a spy. And I went, I need to see this woman in a different light.
That's awesome.
So I was so excited to kind of get into the episode, because I'm like, there is much more about her that I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting to me how you jive with the women who are into women's rights and like fight for civil rights and stuff like that.
Oh, totally.
And like that's what you like click with, because you get that. And I get with the backstory and the reasons why that they're in civil rights.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So it's very interesting that we like click with 2 different parts of it.
Right. We get to the same destination,
right,
but our roads there are different.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have anything that your favorite parts of the Harriet Tubman episode?
It was
or
fun
during research or anything?
Yeah, it was fun reading the research papers me and my brother wrote when
That's
we were
right,
in
yes.
6th grade. That was fun. I was like being
going back to some old research.
Yeah, I was being really hypercritical of myself, and I'm like, I was in 6th grade. Give myself a break.
I know. Absolutely.
And I didn't have Google. I didn't use Google for this.
Yeah, you had probably like 3 textbooks and then what your teacher said.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what you were going off of. Yeah.
You got
Not
it.
that fair. Oh my goodness. Well, our next one, number 7, was Jane Addams. So Jane Addams was a gal who was known as the mother of social work. She founded the template for what is the modern day YMCA, or Boys and Girls Club. Her settlement was known as Hull House, and it utilized the neighborhood for social and civic change. She was a pacifist and an activist for peace. And in 1931, she was the first American woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this was a fascinating episode for us because we actually did this episode twice.
Yeah, we had to record this twice.
It's not uncommon at all in podcasting where any error goes wrong. And we had an error go wrong, Audacity, and
not naming any names.
Audacity, and it is, you get free software, and this is unfortunately what can happen. But luckily, it is the only time it happened, right?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's the only time. So not too bad. Out of 19, now 20 episodes.
Right. Yeah, knock on wood. We're still recording right now.
Right. I know. Audacity has not failed us has only failed us the one time.
Right.
But I think it was also really serendipitous because your cousin was helping you out with the research, but also she was in the room while you were recording.
Right.
And she had a suggestion after the audio failed that I think made the show so much better.
I agree completely. So, yeah, it was actually really cool because my cousin Jessica was listening. I didn't actually know she was listening, but she was. And then she'd also been listening to our podcast, like, while I was recording, and also while they were releasing, she was listening. And she noticed that we always talk about, or at least mention, when a gal gets married, or like her love life, if she's married, have kids, or something like that. And she was actually practicing something from school where you ask these like 3 questions that you thought of while you were learning. And one of you're right. And one of her questions was, well, did Jane ever have a family? And I'm like, oh shoot, I don't even remember looking into this because like what happened was we divide up the questions, right?
Yeah.
And that one just slipped my mind because it was like, okay, maybe Kate covered it. No, Kate didn't cover it. I didn't cover it. Oh no, we didn't even look at it. And then
it just kind of fell through the cracks because normally, I mean, at least Wikipedia will have they got married at some point or had kids at some point, and then that's kind of where it comes up. But it's never like, when did they get married? When did they have kids? Like, we never assume that about every woman.
Exactly. Right. No, yeah, exactly. So we just were like, oh, okay, we didn't look in. But then we dug deeper into it and we're like, oh, Jane had a partner. Now how do we which is really awesome. How do we approach this? Everything like that. I was like, all right, this is really cool. And then it was like, my cousin's 11. So it was very fascinating to be like, okay, so here's the answer. What do you think? Type thing.
Right. Yeah.
It was really awesome.
And I loved how that added another level to the show because we did find out more intentionally about Mary Rosett Smith. And it was amazing once we searched specifically for Mary, how much we found out she was involved with Hull House and Jane.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in Jane's stuff to a certain extent. We had to go digging for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So she really helped, really fill out that episode of telling a much grander story about Jane Addams, who was already fascinating.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So, yeah, I love that. Now, I did learn later, after we had done the show, that Hull House had other offices. We knew of the actual building. We knew that one of the buildings was still there and that it was a museum today. But there was other office spaces. Hull House was still running in the city of Chicago. It ran for 123 years.
Wow.
I learned that it filed for bankruptcy in 2012 because government funding became really, really hard to get. And that is super sad. Yeah. There were articles about, the Chicago Institution, the foundation of social work in Chicago is closing because of bankruptcy, that nobody could save it. And I'm like, that says a lot about today because we really need settlement houses. Settlement houses, I thought, were a fascinating idea.
Oh, yeah.
So then our next one was
Ada Lovelace. She was another gal that was science. She was the mother. Yeah, she was the mother of computers, which is going to seem odd because she died nearly 100 years before the first computer was ever completed. Her work with Charles Babbage was ahead of its time, and her influence and innovation is still inspiring men and women all over the world.
Ada was another one of those where it wasn't a patent, but it was the algorithm was just gorgeous to look at.
Yeah.
And the mechanical drawings for the engine, I lost myself in those. Those were so much fun.
And just the when somebody built the engine and just the pictures and all that, I was like, whoa, this is so pretty. Like,
Right.
I don't understand it, but it's pretty.
Just visually stunning.
Oh, yeah.
This year we did kind of celebrate Ada Lovelace Day. We did social media shout outs. We kind of also did shout outs to other women in science as kind of a, Ada Lovelace Day, celebrate women in STEM. Which was awesome.
Totally.
And I want to do a bigger celebration possibly next year, because I think it would be too fun to do something bigger. Either something, over the internet bigger or something in person bigger. I loved Ada Lovelace. I thought she was fascinating.
She was really cool. And it was really cool talking to my geeky friends who, it was actually my friend who, like, wrote the algorithm that was in the video.
Right.
Was cool.
Oh, I loved
we could
that.
actually show it. It was like this is like the digitized version of the engine, that type of thing. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I love that. It visually put it together.
Totally.
And it was also in a language that we understood.
Right.
Because it's digital now. So it's like, oh, yes.
Sometimes converting mechanical to digital is like very weird, at least to my brain, because so much in history was all mechanical, and now we're all digital. So, but that's the same or similar.
They're like brothers and sisters of each other,
they
basically.
Are.
Yeah,
they really are. Yeah,
same but different.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Now, actually, and I have a correction that I need to make for the Ada Lovelace. Not necessarily the episode, but our media for it. We do a meme that we put out before the show that has the quote that we use in the episode.
Right.
But then also we have the graphics, especially on YouTube, behind the episode. Now, in all of the graphics, without thinking, this was all me, I put the first female computer programmer. Now, our listener, Bonnie, pointed out she's not just the first female. She's the first computer programmer. And I gave her kudos because that is 100% correct. And I should have caught it because I'm usually really good on that,
Right.
What, like Alice Guy, it's like she's not the first woman to make a narrative film. She created the narrative film. But yes, so Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer.
Wow. That's awesome.
So then our next episode was Susan B. Anthony, which I kind of really geeked out about.
Oh, yeah, you love Susan B. Anthony.
I love Susan B.
I feel like you want to be Susan B. Anthony.
I don't think I'm good enough to be Susan B. Like, I think she has something that I admire but could never achieve. Like, it's something that I really like. We need that in the world, but I know it's not me. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate it. I can't go as far as Susan B does. I can't. But I love her. So she is a gal who dedicated her life to women's rights. She was sparked by not being allowed to speak because she was a woman. She then spoke around the country about the importance of the right to vote, anti-slavery, and the dangers of alcohol. She's still completely fascinating to me. I love her persistence and her gumption. She just wows me every time.
She does. I love how excited you get about her. I do. It was very interesting with me because we hear so much about her activism that we don't really know a ton about her personal life. We don't know tons. And for me, I click a lot better when I understand the personal life. So it's great that you're passionate about her. But I'm like, well, I'm gonna keep balancing you out with the good and the bad, I guess, because I'm like,
right, exactly.
I mean, I love her and I love everything that she does, but it was very hard for me to click with her. So it's good that you click with her.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think my favorite part of that episode was reading that testimony.
Totally.
I loved that when the judge finally allowed her to speak and, she just gave it to him.
Yeah.
I loved that. That was so fun. I could never do that, though.
You do it in your own way.
In my own way on the internet. But yeah, getting to know more about Susan B. Anthony. I mean, she'll definitely be one come, voting time that people are more aware of her. And then also she is on, our dollar coin too. Sometimes people remember.
Totally.
Yes. And then our next one was a special that we did.
It is. So the next one was episode 10, and it was our Film Pioneer special, which Kate...
It was from my presentation that I did at a film festival.
So you covered Alice Guy Blaché, Lois Weber, Dorothy Arzner, and Margaret Booth. So they all started with the birth of cinema in 1895 till 1982. We talked about gals who created the framework for movies today, invented techniques that told a richer story, and one of whom was more popular and paid more than D.W. Griffith. Yet, many of us have never heard of any of these gals, although one of them created the boom mic, which was fascinating to me because it's funny. After we did this episode, so there was been more than one person who came up to me and was like, you know, I think it was a gal who discovered the boom mic. Like, you should probably cover her. I don't remember her name, but I think it was I was like, yeah, her name's Dorothy. She did the boom mic. We already covered her. We're like, oh, wait, really? Yeah, no, we got you covered. It's all good.
Exactly. We're on it.
We're on it. And you're right. She's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Like, wow, girls are smart. They know how to use boom mics. No, we know how to make boom mics.
Right. Exactly. It's not just use. It's called invent.
Right. Right.
I'm glad that one worked. It was one that I worked really hard for a presentation to a film festival, right. So it made sense. I offered them 4 different presentations that I could do, and I let them pick. And when they did pick, of course, I had 3 that were already done, and then the Film Pioneer one I did not have done. But I knew that if they did pick it, it would make a really great Your Gal Friday episode. And so when they picked it, it's like, well, I'm doing research and it's going to be a 2 for 1.
Right.
So when I pitched it to you and I'm like, is it okay if I just kind of like do this presentation and you respond? And you're like, yes.
Totally. You did this presentation because of school outreach. Can you tell us some more about the school outreach that you do?
Yeah. So because our network home is Gals Guide, we do outreach programs, and we do them at schools and festivals, conventions, and events. So, yep, the Film Pioneer episode came out of the Hobnobbin Film Festival, which was an outreach that we did. So far this year, Gals Guide has presented to over 450 students a very interactive program on women of history. We make a game for the students, and we have an elementary school version, a middle school version, high school, and university version. So it's really cool to kind of tailor it to these kids. Coming up, we actually have a Starbase Indie presentation where we're doing the Women of Science, also as an interactive game with prizes this time.
Ooh, that sounds
prizes. Really fun. Yeah, so we're going to be having tons of fun over Thanksgiving weekend at Starbase Indie. So I love it. Now, our outreach programs are really popular in the month of March because it's International Women's Month. Right. However, we are available for presentations year-round, and we really do tailor it to the grade level or to the organization that wants us to come and talk and present. So check out the school outreach tab at galsguide.org if you're interested in having us come to your school, because they're really cool. We make them really fun.
Totally. And you've been doing this longer than we've been doing the podcast. Right,
exactly. Now, the school outreach started probably a few months before we started doing the podcast, but also it came from, my past life of the filmmaking stuff. When I would be doing film festivals would always have some kind of, educational component, and they could tell that I wasn't scared of public speaking. So they would ask me to come talk either about directing or screenwriting, and then eventually somebody said, can you come and tell us what it's like for female directors? And then my world totally, opened up.
Right.
So yes, I have no problem talking to people, presenting to people, and make history and education as fun as humanly possible. I love it.
That's so awesome.
Yes. All right. You want to do the next one? Our next episode.
Yeah. I want to do Mary Anderson. I love Mary Anderson.
Good. Isn't she adorable?
She's so great.
Gosh, I love her.
So with Mary, I'll explain in a second. Let me summarize Mary Anderson for you. She was
a little refresher for the people.
Exactly. In case you forgot or didn't hear this episode, Mary Anderson is the inventor of the windshield wiper. And in this episode, we did a little automotive history, and it was a fun sidebar on more wonderful gals with patents. And it was just Mary Anderson. Oh my gosh. I learned from her that I really, really enjoy learning about gals who invent things.
Oh.
Yeah. Because, she was on her science side, which makes sense, because inventors, right?
Yes.
But she was a little less intimidating, because I'm like, oh, I use windshield wipers every day, or, they're at least on my car that I drive every day, so it's a little more relatable to me. She was so much fun.
She really is.
But at the same time, there was not a lot of information.
Yes.
So it was very fascinating trying to figure out automotive history and why she did certain things because of the time period, because of the types of cars.
Right.
And then it was really fascinating going through different laws of when windshield wipers were
standard,
mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh my gosh, did we go down a rabbit trail?
Very fun rabbit hole. I like it, that one though.
Oh man, it was a deep rabbit hole. I got overwhelmed. I was like, wow, what am I doing with my life? Because I don't understand what I'm looking at.
I remember you messaging me going, why am I looking up windshield wipers on trains?
Right, yeah. I was like, what?
I'm like, I didn't ask you to, but it's fascinating.
Right, exactly. I suddenly was like, oh, are windshield wipers on trains
they
too?
Are.
Why do I need to know this? I don't know. I want to know.
It was amazing.
There were so many different things. I was like, oh man, I do not feel adequate enough to research these gals. But at the same time, it's like, all right, I'm learning. We're learning all together here.
Right, exactly. Yes. I loved doing that episode. It was one of those things where there was not that much on her.
There was
the
not.
Majority of information that we got came from a very long obituary. Thank goodness there was a very long obituary.
Oh, yeah.
Because we could use that to at least start to put together pieces, or at least have starting points of more searches and things like that.
Right.
There is one thing I always have regretted about that episode. It's that we didn't reach out to Mary's great-grandchildren for interview.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we did discover they did an interview with NPR, and that's how we knew that they were still talking about Mary, that they were interested in about Mary. But honestly, at that time, we did not have the technology to even record an interview third party. We didn't know what to do.
We didn't. No.
So it wasn't the right time. But it is something that it's like, oh man, it is something that I wish we would have been able to do, or at least had the mind withal to try to figure that out. Because we used their quote that we all have Mary moments, and I love that the family keeps Mary Anderson in their memories and alive. They should be very proud, and they are. So I love that.
That's awesome.
So next up was Julia Child. Now, Julia Child, a lot of people do kind of know who she was, but the recap is she is our Lady of the Ladle, and she did pepper our television screens from her kitchen and reached ours. She added spice to our lives with French flavors in our cooking, and the esteemed gal cooked her way into our hearts for generations. I had so much fun with the cooking puns. Oh, especially cooking puns.
For days.
Oh. This is the favorite article that I did, because the article I included nothing but cooking puns, and I highlighted them for amusement. Get it? Mint? Oh, I did.
Oh my gosh. You're too much. I love it.
I adored it. I did watch Julie and Julia after the show aired.
Oh, did you?
I did.
That's right. You did.
Yes.
Did you like it?
I really did like it. It was hard for me because it was Nora Ephron's last film, and I really love Nora Ephron. So it was like this bittersweet, this is the last new episode or new movie I'm going to see from Nora Ephron. But I did really like the movie. I thought Meryl Streep. Oh. My God, Meryl Streep.
I know. Meryl Streep, though.
Yep.
She's so famous now that she's almost overrated. We know she's good, but seriously, she's so good.
But she's good. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
She's so good. Oh my gosh. Julia Child was fun, but she was very overwhelming. She did so much.
She really did.
She could have almost been a 2-part episode.
Yeah.
And her video was so long. Oh my gosh, her video took me so very long.
Julia Child was even one, I almost forgot, we had to take an extra week because I found all those war records.
Yes.
And those war records were amazing.
Yeah.
There was a lot to go through there, and I'm like, but I'm finding out so much cool stuff.
Right?
So then our next one was extremely popular. And who was that?
So for our episodes of 13 and 14, we did J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
Now, this was the first time that we did a mini cast.
Right. Yes.
Which, it was also our first one that we did a gal that was still living.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. It's very interesting that we did something doubly new.
Right.
You know?
Change it up.
Oh, we'll just do it all at once.
Why not?
Just, it's cool. In case you didn't know, J.K. Rowling is a gal who sold more than 400 million copies of her books. She got children excited to read massive page-turners, won multiple awards, including being named the most influential woman in Britain, and unlike other gals we've talked about in this series so far, she's still alive and building a legacy and inspiration as we speak.
Yes, I love JK.
Oh yeah, JK was so much fun. And Kate, I heard that you, after recording, watched all of the movies.
Yeah, I thought I had seen a majority of them, but we started watching the third movie and I went, I have never seen this. And I couldn't believe, I'm like, wait a minute. But we owned all of them. It was something usually around Christmas time, they would have like the $3 or $5 DVDs. And I'd be like, well, let's get all the Harry Potters. We will watch them eventually. Many of them were still in their shrink wrap. But yeah, my daughters and I, we have watched all of them. Cammie finished reading all the books, my oldest. My youngest is starting to read the books, which is super exciting. And my little Samantha, she is going to be Hermione Granger for Halloween.
I'm so proud.
She's so adorable.
Proud. I feel like sometimes I'm like the proud older sister.
Yes,
over here,
absolutely.
But they don't know it,
They feel it, trust me.
Oh, I'm so proud of you girls.
Well, when I tell them what you're up to, they also act like a proud sister. You know what I mean? They're just
That's awesome.
So
yes.
I think it's mutual.
Yay.
So you said you were going to. Did you ever? Your life has been quite busy, though.
I didn't get. I've been pretty busy. I moved and.
But you have it on your list to watch the movies.
Oh yeah, I have it on my list to watch the movies. I'm gonna do it. I'll do it.
Exactly. And then I'm sure I will get a flurry of messages. I can't believe. Wait, what do you mean?
Oh,
what?
Yeah.
No.
Oh yeah, totally. That's exactly what's gonna happen. You know it. Like, Kate, did you? I didn't know this whole thing happened.
There's some surprises in there that I didn't even know, and I was like, wait, what? Huh? What?
What?
It is amazing.
But
I know. Oh, I love it. Our next one after JK was Annie Jump Cannon. And Annie Jump Cannon was an American astronomer in a time when women couldn't vote and really accepted for their scientific minds. Her work of cataloging the stars, she created the stellar classification system that is still used today. She was also nearly deaf as well. Do you remember the initials for her classification system or the mnemonic of how?
Yes. Oh, be a fine gal, kiss me.
Yes, that's right.
I got it. We didn't even write that down.
I was doing a presentation for the Starbase thing, and I spoiler alert, I'm going to cover Annie Jump Cannon. And so Samantha was watching me type it up, and I'm like, who created the classification system? And I start putting in all the initials. She's like, how can you remember those? And I'm like, oh, be a fine gal, kiss me.
I love it. It's so much fun to say, though.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Kate, you got to tell us what happened, the cool thing that happened after this episode.
So after this episode, one of our listeners, Kara, was so inspired by something that we had said during the episode that she sent me, I think around midnight, a little message that made me just burst into tears. So Kira heard us say, wouldn't it be so cool to have something up in the stars or up in space named after you? I think, Phoebe, you were actually the one that said it.
Yeah.
And
yep, I did say that.
Kira took it to heart. And she went online and she named stars after us. So there is not only a Kate Chaplin star and a Phoebe Freer star, but there is a Gal's Guide to the Galaxy star. And it's up in the stars and it's super cool.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's this website and you can see it and it's named and we're all grouped together.
Yes, and it has like the course or the longitude and not longitude and latitude. What do you call it? The address, basically, if you want to.
Yeah, the address of the star. Oh my goodness, that was just so cool. I was like, Kate sent me the email with it, and I was like, "Is this for real?
I know.
Is this like a star, like a star, like a real one,
right?
like a burning ember in the sky? This has my name on it.
Right,
what?
Exactly. Oh, so sweet. If you want to actually see where our star is, go to galsguide.org. We actually have an article of "We have a star named after us." I think that's the title of the article.
Yay.
And you can go and you can directly see where in the sky it is at. It was just
Totally.
It was heartwarmingly moving. I just loved it.
We were just talking the day before. We're like, who's listening?
Right.
Oh my gosh, we got stars.
I know, right? Oh, that is one way to show listening. And it's like, oh my gosh, it was so moving.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. So the other thing that we do, actually, speaking of the article on the website that you can check out, we do an article on the website of all the gals that we cover. The idea is some people like to listen, like the podcast. Some people like to watch something, hence the video that Phoebe does. And I do the articles. And it's also a spot, like if we mention something in the podcast that's like, check out this video or check out this article, that's where we put them. We put them in this article that people can actually search, and it has images and things we mention on the show. And yeah, I do rock the articles. My favorite one is the Julia Child one, as I said earlier. Do you have a favorite article that we've done?
I don't. Because I'm a lame person who moves on to the next episode as soon as we're done.
You're like, and cut the strings, I'm out. All right. Exactly.
No, yeah, I'm like, all right, moving on.
Well, also speaking of articles, I know this one's going to be kind of weird to mention so close to Halloween, but we do have an article of Halloween costumes inspired by Your Gal Friday gals. And it's really fun. A lot of it is stuff that you can kind of make or put together from your closet. Otherwise, other things we have links to of like where you can find them. So even though Halloween may kind of be in the past window as you're maybe listening to this episode, but think of year-round cosplay. We have some great gals that you can cosplay.
Totally.
Yes. So then our next episode was your mom. Oh my gosh.
It was my mom.
Give us a little summary on your mom.
Episodes number 16 and 17. This was also a mini cast, and we covered my mom, Beth Freer, or also E.M. Freer. So my mom was actually another first. She was our first interview, which was really cool. Just to tell you a little bit more about her, here's her summary. She was a gal who is a professional photographer and author, and she enjoys allowing pictures and words to tell a story. With 4 books available and a 5th underway, she allows her words to paint an image, and she's been inspired by online gaming and writes about adventures and experiences, and gives them a fresh life and ability to travel in the pages of the new medium. So this is my mom, and it was really fun because we got to interview her.
Yes.
And we got to learn about, different ways we should interview people in regards to our equipment and everything. Right. But she was she was really patient with us as we were learning how to do the technology part. Totally. We both have interviewed people before. We basically interview each other almost to a certain extent every episode. It's like, what did you learn? What did you learn? But it was the technical part that we were really kind of worried about, because you want to be comfortable while you're recording a show. And if we couldn't figure out the technology, nobody was going to be comfortable. So So she was a friendly, but also so insightful and so fun. I loved that. I love that show. I really do. Yeah, it was fun.
And I think you learned new stuff about your mom too.
I did. Yep. That was funny. They're not like normal questions you ask your mom, you know?
Right, exactly. But yet it can be.
It can be.
Dun, dun,
ask your parents questions.
Absolutely. Interview your parents. Interview them like you would, a mentor or a celebrity that you are in awe of. Interview your parents.
Totally.
Get to know them.
And then open them up to interview you.
Yes, cool. Absolutely. 100%. So our next episode was Madam CJ Walker. She is a hard-working gal who created a hair care line that made her one of the most successful African-American business owners of her time. She was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an activist. And we kept saying Madame.
We did.
We got better as the episode went along.
I think so. Madame.
We got in between there. I felt bad, but it was.
I know.
I also, every time I typed it, I put an E on the end of it. So, I mean, part of it was just,
me too.
I think because we covered a lot of French in the beginning. We had Alice, and then Bessie went to France. So we were learning a whole bunch of French words.
We were.
And so we were getting a little bit used to the more Madame, But yeah, no, it's Madam CJ Walker.
Yeah.
I love learning more about my Indianapolis gal. I mean, I realize that not a lot of people know that much about her, and it was great to know about her.
Yeah, and it was fun reaching out to my friend who's a hairdresser who
Yes.
had heard about her, because, like, as soon as you talk to somebody who's heard about one of these gals that we're covering, it brings it to life.
It really does. It means they matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so used to now being like, well, we're covering this gal, and, oh, you haven't heard of her? Oh, that's all right. Go listen to her episode. I never heard of her either.
Right.
That kind of thing. But it's like, okay, it's really cool to once in a while reach out and be like, hey, yeah, I've heard of her, and here's why she's cool, and, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Oh, this was the one. I did get some funny feedback from my husband, who listens to every episode, and he always has interesting feedback. The feedback besides the Madam and Madame part, I mean, that I kind of already knew. Like before when he started talking, I'm like, please don't tell me the Madame and the Madam. I know. But then he went, I don't remember seeing her stuff at Sephora. To which I then asked him as straight as I could, honey, when was the last time you were in a Sephora?
Right.
Because we haven't been in one in a good 10 years. And he went, oh, yeah. I'm like, it's a recent-ish thing. And so that was interesting feedback from my husband. I love that one.
Totally. That's really hilarious.
Yep.
It was fun because she has products out right now that people have reviews and stuff on YouTube, and I just kind of got sucked into it. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Ooh, I didn't know shampoos. You should look into this. I didn't know. I spent a good hour just watching YouTube videos. Like, well, all right then.
It's fun. It's the more you know.
Just right, exactly. Just talking up the research and keep on moving.
Yeah. And so that leads us to last week's episode, which we'll still do a recap. Just in case.
Oh, yeah.
Who was last week?
Last week was Annie Oakley, and I was super excited because I did see the musical that's based off of her life.
Yes.
So I kind of knew more. Her summary was a gal who was named by Sitting Bull Little Miss Sure Shot. She wowed audiences before, after, and during her time with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. She was an international star and rarely missed the mark. She was awesome.
She was very awesome. And I really didn't know all that much about her. I didn't see the musicals. But after the show, I went to Greenville, Ohio, and I went to the Garst Museum, which is the home of the Annie Oakley Center. I also went to her birthplace and where her gravesite and a statue that they had for her in the town. And I learned so much more about Annie Oakley that I just want to take a field trip and take everybody there.
That's awesome.
I geeked out and I sent Phoebe a photo. I tried to send just one because I had 50. Actually, I think I had 50 photos. But I found the wedding picture of Annie and Frank.
Know. That was so cool.
Isn't it cool? Their wedding photo has the dog in it that we mentioned, that they met through the dog. The dog's in their wedding photo. And I was like, oh my gosh, Phoebe, you have to see this.
Yeah, that was adorable. Were you surprised by how much you liked Annie? Because I know that guns kind of make you a little uneasy.
They make me uneasy.
Yeah.
I like that she used it as an educational tool. And I think to
Totally.
me, it was an educational tool and it was an empowerment tool. And I think that's what really, really helped me change my perceptions. Because I do get weird about guns.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense.
It is a today's world kind of situation is what it is.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yes. So every episode, we ask each other, what did we learn from this gal? So I
Right.
thought maybe for this, as a recap, we would ask each other, what kind of like big picture, what overall way, what did we learn from the gals of season 1?
Totally.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
Do you want to answer first?
No, because whenever I answer first, you go, that's what I was going to say.
Oh, yeah, that's true. All right, I got this. Yeah, that's what we learned. That's funny. That's what we learned last week.
That is what we've learned about doing this show, is let Phoebe go first.
Because here's the thing. He is really good with, like, writing scripts beforehand. I tend to be better when I can just kind of think about it.
Yeah, the personal reflection. Yeah, I mean, the names and dates, you have all of that stuff down.
Right.
But when you come to the personal reflection, you want it to be, personal and off the cuff. Yeah,
exactly. And I learned things from, like, stuff that you mentioned in the podcast. I want to make sure that I, include that. So it's funny. We learned from, in the broad scheme of things, like 2 episodes before the end to,
let Phoebe go first.
Anyway, so I learned from in an overall way that learning's for everybody. I was kind of intimidated at first because I really didn't know a lot about a lot of these gals. So, but I learned that as like, it's okay to not know, because if you ask more questions, the more you ask, the more you know, because you'll just keep digging and you'll keep finding things. And that's okay,
Mm-hmm. You got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. I've also learned that we can learn something from everybody. Everybody has their own personal story that they have. They have a reason for everything that they've done. And I really enjoyed learning about each gal as if they were like a character in a movie.
Right.
Because when you're writing characters, you have to figure out their backstory. You have to know who they are behind the screen, like the stuff that you don't explain, the stuff that you don't spell out. You have to understand that part of them in order to write their actions.
Right.
I learned that it's very fascinating to me to learn about history in a more personal way, learning who they are as a person, what their backstory is, where they grew up, how they were raised, and why they do what they do.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
If I learn why they do something, I'll remember their name, I'll remember where they came from, I'll remember what time period they're set in, like everything.
Yeah, it cements it.
Exactly. Those things are hard for me to remember, but as soon as I personalize it, as soon as I understand the motives, then I understand the person.
Yeah.
So that was a very fascinating thing for me to learn from the show.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. See? This is why we let you go first.
So, Kate, what did you learn?
I'm like an overachiever. So I actually went through every episode.
Oh, my goodness.
I did. Because, we have it on there, what did you learn? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull from every episode and look back and see, is there any, overarching thing? Was there a similar thing-ma-ding?
Yeah, that's cool.
So I was just kind of interested. And it was hard sometimes to put it into like 1 or 2 words of what I learned, because like, So, but what I found interesting is that we started with Alice. And in that episode, we talk about how Alice saw the first demonstration of a movie camera. And what she said was, I think I can do it better. And I really think running through the list of all of the gals that we've covered this season, every single one of them thought that they could do it better. I think that was kind of the through line for me. Because it's certainly true with our inventors, right? They were inventing something better, right? Mary with the windshield wiper. But also Ella with scatting, Annie Jump Cannon with classifying the stars, Harriet Tubman, a better way of freeing slaves. You know what I mean? So I think each one of them created something new, but also they built on something that was already in existence. And I think that's how history works. I honestly don't think anymore that it's that if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. I don't think that's right. What I think it is if you don't know your history, you're missing out on a chance of creating something new and making the world better. And I think that's what I really learned by putting these gals together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I loved it.
Yay! So now we're going to talk about our listener feedback, which we really enjoy listener feedback.
Please.
It just tells us if we're doing a good job, and we'd love to have more.
Yes.
But for now, we'll tell you what we have so far.
Yes.
And if you are listening right now and you want to give feedback, please let us know in any type of platform. We would love to hear from you, honestly.
Yes.
If you've made it this far, give us a shout. Just say hi. That's all.
Yes.
Now, our first one is from Rebecca, and she said, I'd vote for Alice Guy Blaché and Bessie Coleman as my faves so far. I like those two because they are lesser-known ladies who really should be much better known. For instance, Alice is less famous than the men who were making movies after her, and Bessie is lesser known than, say, Amelia Earhart, who is still awesome, but more people should be aware of Bessie. Which, side note, I totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
100%.
100% with you.
Yeah, exactly. Rebecca finishes off and says, although they have all been great so far. And I so appreciate you, Rebecca.
Yes.
That is great feedback, and oh my gosh.
And
Yay.
two great episodes that I love too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Hits the
what
nail
else
on
we
the
got,
head.
Kate?
The next one comes from Barbara Thomas, and she commented on our Alice Guy Blaché episode. She said, thanks for the facts. People always think that it was a man who first gave us film. I found your podcast informative. Look forward to the rest. So, yay!
Awesome. This last one was from Anna, and she commented on Bessie Coleman episode, and she says, wow, so inspirational. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Anna, for
thank you.
commenting. Thank you, honestly.
Yes, we super appreciate any and all feedback. We adore it. Well, then let's talk about our plans for season 2. Dun, dun, dun. So, yes, we have a massive list of gals to choose from, but we really want to know what gals our listeners are interested in. So really, send us your requests by all means.
Absolutely.
Annie Oakley actually was a listener request. See? So we listened to them. May Wright Sewell is another request, and we have that down in season 2. We were going to get to her in season 2.
Oh,
so
yes.
We're on it. Now, I loved having your mom on the show. And so, I definitely am looking forward to, now that we've kind of figured out the technology, of having guests, more guests.
Right.
I adore it. So for our listeners, if you are a gal who is up for sharing your life story and how others can learn from you, please contact us. If you know a gal that we should be talking about and interviewing, contact us. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Now, we had this cool idea actually from my boyfriend. We acquired this cool idea to have story arcs in our seasons.
Yeah.
And I thought this was a really cool idea, and there's many different ways we could actually tackle this.
Mm-hmm.
So, story arc meaning either throughout the whole season or every 4 episodes maybe, there'd be like a theme. Or like
something that connects them.
Theme. Something tying them all together.
Yep.
There's so many ways we could do this. We could do it going by time period. Gals who've met each other and lead one to another. Or we could do all scientists and be like, because this gal invented this other gal could invent this next thing. Something like that.
Yeah.
Or we could do gals in movies, or we could do gals in... There's just so many options.
There really is. Yeah, that's definitely one of, let's see what we can do.
There's so many different things. What I really love, the whole tying everybody together. Mm-hmm. Season 1 was great. I really loved tying it all, going through all these gals. But I really think the story arc idea is really great, because then there's a reason to go from one to another. There's a reason... Maybe we do a famous one along with 3 others that you haven't heard of, stuff like that. So that, they're all tied together. But it was just, that's an idea for season 2.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that. The other thing is we're going to try to do 20 gals as well for season 2.
Right.
Now, with more funding, we can do more. So really support us on Patreon. I mean, tell your friends about Patreon because we can totally do this, but we really need your help with it. So
Totally,
patreon.com/galsguide. Just saying. Our goal is to come back in February. That is the plan. Phoebe and I are going to start recording before that. But we are hoping to come back in February. So stay tuned to our social media, pages, and also to our Patreon, because we will post solid dates as soon as we have them of when we are coming back. So that'll be awesome.
Totally.
But now the in between the seasons. Dun, dun, dun. Just what in the world are we doing in between the seasons?
Oh, all of the things.
All of the things. That's right. So both of us are going to be working with Gals Guide. We both write articles for Gals Guide. I'm going to be doing school outreach programs. So that is my busy season for doing school outreach. But we're also talking about with Gals Guide what we can do with the content that we already have from season 1. Now, we have tossed around ideas of books and journals and group travel excursions and merchandise. So we are tossing around all these wonderful ideas. Who knows what will come out of this melting pot? But that is what we are going to try to do. I will put a whole bunch of question marks around the might pop in for a special episode. If we find something that we just, oh my gosh, we got to get the band back together and do this special episode. So please subscribe if you haven't yet. That way it'll reach your device. So if you watch on YouTube, it will send you a notification. If you're on iTunes, it'll show up in your feed. So subscribe if you haven't yet. So that way, if there's a special episode between now and February pops up, you got it. You're on it.
Right, exactly. We have tons and tons of ideas.
Yeah, we do.
What to do and what gals to cover. But we also, I just want to emphasize again the feedback. If you like what we're doing, we want to know.
Yeah, what's working?
If you like it. Yeah, what's working, what's not working. What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? Anything, honestly. Just give us a shout. I would really love to hear it. And if the listeners know of any schools or teachers, students who need resources for gals like this, please feel free to share us and let us know because we might be able to come to you for it,
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're all about shining a spotlight on these gals. We love them like they're our sisters, aunts.
Definitely.
And so we are very much cheerleaders and, campaigners of these gals.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
We have loved doing this show. We learned so much about these amazing gals of history, and we really hope that you do too. We are all now time travelers of history, being able to reclaim women's history and put that spotlight on it. These are not just profiles of women. These are profiles on people that we can all learn from and create a better future. I know that my life has been richer just in doing this show. Phoebe, would you say the same?
Yes, absolutely.
Aw. So please stay connected with us between the seasons. Last week, I listed off our social media places, which are great, and we're going to keep them going in between the seasons. But check out galsguide.org. That's where you're going to find links to all of our shows, to news, to insightful articles, events, and be able to connect with all of those social media pages, including our Patreon. So galsguide.org, check it out. Basically, it's our home base. So until then, time travelers, keep exploring and keep learning, and we're going to be talking to you soon in season 2. For more information about this week's gal or to check out our previous episodes, visit galsguide.org. To support the show, visit the Gals Guide Patreon page. We've got great perks like behind the scenes, early access, and private live streams. Thank you so much for subscribing to Your Gal Friday.